All right, so today we're diving deep into something, well, as old as time, really, but still so relevant: justice. We're cracking open Plato's Republic, Book 2, to be exact, but don't worry.
Yeah,
This isn't going to be like your college philosophy lecture or anything.
definitely not no. We're going to be zeroing in on some specific arguments that Plato sets up.
Yeah.
Um, and these arguments, honestly, they feel shockingly modern, even though they were written thousands of years ago.
Yeah, and it's the kind of stuff that really makes you question, like, your own sense of what's right and wrong, you know? And the way Plato does this, he drops us right into the action. It's like
Yeah.
we're eavesdropping on this really intense debate between Socrates and his friend Glaucon.
And Glaucon, he's not your average debate partner. He's like that friend who always plays devil's advocate, right?
Mm-hmm.
He just loves to poke holes in your arguments.
Oh, yeah.
And he really pushes Socrates to go beyond those, surface-level answers about what makes something good or just.
Yeah, and he really doesn't hold back. Like, Glaucon just comes right out and says, what if people only act justly because they have to? Not because it's actually, good for them, but because they're afraid of the consequences, right? Afraid of the laws or getting caught or, social pressure,
Yes.
that kind of thing.
And to illustrate this point, he uses this really mind-blowing thought experiment,
Yeah.
the Ring of Gyges.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine you find a ring, and this ring makes you invisible,
Okay.
completely invisible. And not just that, it also means there are no consequences for your actions.
Yeah.
You could do whatever you want. No one will ever know it was you. So would even the quote-unquote good guys still stay good? Or would they give in to those, those more selfish desires, those temptations?
It really makes you think, right? Like, is it even human nature to be good? Or is it all just a big act we put on to avoid getting in trouble?
It's a good question.
And then, you start to think about how much of that plays out in our own lives, right? Like those moments where maybe you could get away with something, maybe no one would even know. Do you still do the right thing then?
Right. And, it makes you think about how we even structure our systems, our institutions. I mean, are they designed to actually promote justice, or are they more concerned with just the appearance of justice?
Ooh.
Because if it's all about appearances, does that change our behavior?
That's kind of a scary thought.
It is.
But Glaucon, he doesn't stop there.
No, he doesn't.
He wants to really, hammer home this point, So he creates these two extreme examples: the perfectly unjust man and the perfectly just man.
Okay, I'm listening.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
So the perfectly unjust man, right? This guy is a master manipulator. He seems totally virtuous on the surface. Everyone thinks he's great. But underneath, he gets everything he wants through deceit, through wickedness.
It's like the ultimate con man almost.
Right. And he gets away with it. He's living the high life. Everyone loves him. He's got it all. But then you have the perfectly just man, and his life is the complete opposite, right?
Oh, wow.
It's a complete disaster, constantly misunderstood. People talk bad about him. He loses everything. But the thing is, deep down, he never wavers from his morals. He always does what he believes is right, even when it costs him everything.
So what's Glaucon saying here? That it's better to be the unjust guy?
Well, he's saying that according to how most people see things, right, society wouldn't praise the just man. They'd probably call him a sucker. So it makes you question, is it really better to be just, even if it means, you get the short end of the stick? Or is that just a recipe for misery?
Yeah, it's almost like we see that play out all the time, even today.
Right.
But wait, there's more. Glaucon's brother, Adeimantus, he jumps into the conversation, and he is not there to play peacemaker.
Oh, no.
He's like, hold my beer, bring in the heat. And he says, look, even parents, right, they teach their kids to be good for the rewards.
Right.
Be good for Santa, right?
Right.
It's good to get into a good college. Be good so you can get that promotion.
It's like that be good for Santa argument, but on a much bigger scale, It makes you wonder, are we really doing good just to avoid punishment or get a pat on the head? What happens when those external motivators are gone?
It's a good question, right? And then they bring up these famous poets like Hesiod and Homer, the rock stars of the ancient world.
Yeah.
And these guys, they wrote all about the gods rewarding the just and punishing the wicked. But Adeimantus is basically saying, is that the only reason to be ethical? Because if that's all it is, what happens when those rewards don't show up? What happens when those in power, they don't seem to play by the same rules?
Right. It's like, is justice just a transaction then?
A good question.
But Adeimantus isn't done. He takes it even further.
Oh, no.
And this is where things get kind of shady.
Okay.
He's saying that if what really matters is being seen as just, then it's all about appearances, right? Deception, putting on a good show, that becomes the real path to success.
Interesting.
Okay, so we're left with this question. If it's all a big show, are we all just playing our parts in this grand illusion of justice? And where does Plato even begin to counter that argument?
Well, it's important to remember that Plato, like speaking through Socrates, right? He's playing the long game here. He's not just trying to win a debate. He's trying to lay the foundation for a completely different way of thinking about justice. One that goes way beyond just like external actions.
It's more than just like checking boxes, following the rules because someone told you to.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
One of his like core ideas is that true justice, it isn't just about what you do, it's about the internal state of your soul.
Okay.
It's about who you are when no one's watching, even when you could get away with anything.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but explain it to me like I'm not a philosopher. How does a just soul, how does that actually help someone, especially when it seems like the world rewards the opposite?
Okay, so think back to Glaucon's argument for a second, right? He's basically saying that if we could all get away with it, everyone would just act unjustly to get what they want. But Plato's saying that kind of thinking, it misses this, like, crucial point.
What's that?
A soul that's in harmony, right? That's guided by reason, by virtue. That kind of soul, it's its own reward. It's about inner peace, inner strength, even when things are tough on the outside.
So it's like true justice brings inner peace. It's not about like seeking external validation or material success.
You could put it that way, yeah. Plato believed that a just soul, even if it faces hardships, it's ultimately stronger, more resilient than an unjust one, which is always going to be driven by those like insatiable desires, that constant need for more.
Because you're never going to be satisfied if you're always chasing something outside of yourself.
Exactly. And that kind of inner turmoil, it can manifest in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Anxiety, fear, the inability to like form genuine connections with others, all things that actually make a good life. Well, good.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So how do we get to that state of inner harmony then, this just soul that Plato's talking about? Is it something you're born with, or is it something you can like cultivate, work towards?
So this is where Plato gets really ambitious.
Yeah.
He argues that it's not enough to just like tell people to be good, to lay down a bunch of rules and punishments.
Because like Levcon was saying, people will always find ways to game the system, especially if they think they can get away with it.
Precisely. Plato believed that we need something much deeper. A love of wisdom, a constant pursuit of truth, a deep understanding of like the human condition, all the messiness and complexity that comes with it.
And he called this philosophy.
You guessed it.
So philosophy is the answer, not stricter laws, not harsher punishments.
To Plato, philosophy, it wasn't just some abstract intellectual exercise, it was a way of life. And he even envisioned a society where the leaders were philosophers.
Wait, philosopher kings? Isn't that a bit idealistic? Like, who's going to convince a politician to put down their campaign slogans and pick up, like, a philosophy book?
Perhaps. But Plato truly believed that only those who could grasp the true nature of justice, who were guided by reason, and not swayed by personal gain or, those more, shall we say, primal instincts, only those people could create a truly just society.
So he's saying a just society starts with each person, like striving for a just soul.
Precisely. It's a radical idea, definitely open to debate. But there's something undeniably powerful about connecting personal morality to these larger social structures. It makes you think about how each individual action, each choice we make, it contributes to the world around us.
For sure. Okay, so going back to Glaucon's challenge for a second, he argued that appearing just was actually more beneficial than actually being just. It's almost like he's predicting our modern obsession with image over substance.
And unfortunately, that's an argument that still resonates today, doesn't it?
Totally.
Think about how much emphasis is put on image, on public perception, on crafting a certain persona, especially in the age of social media.
It's everywhere you look, whether you're a politician, a CEO, even just someone trying to like build a personal brand online. It's like everyone's trying to curate the perfect image, even if it doesn't always match up with reality.
Right, and that ties into Plato's concerns about appearances. He understood that when we prioritize reputation over genuine virtue, we create a system that rewards superficiality,
Mm.
deception.
It's all about the facade, not the foundation. And
Exactly.
that's a recipe for disaster, right?
It can be, yeah.
Because if we're always focused on appearances, we lose sight of what really matters.
Exactly. But it's important to note that Plato wasn't naive about the power of appearances. He even acknowledged how they could be useful in certain contexts. Well, remember his discussion of, like, noble lies.
Yeah.
Those myths and stories that, while not literally true, could serve a greater purpose in society.
Right, like using stories to teach important lessons or inspire people to act virtuously.
Exactly. But he also cautioned against letting those noble lies corrupt our understanding of what is truly good and just.
Right,
It's a delicate balance, isn't it?
definitely. So how do we navigate this tension then between the allure of appearances, that desire to be liked and accepted, and the pursuit of genuine virtue?
Yeah.
Especially in a world where it feels like we're constantly being judged, measured against these, like, often unrealistic
That's
standards.
the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something actually that we're going to explore more deeply in the next part of our deep dive.
So it sounds like we're at this crossroads, right, where we got to figure out how to move beyond just playing the game of appearances, especially in a world that seems to, like, value image over, well, everything else.
Yeah, it's a challenge, for sure. And it's something that has implications not just for us as individuals, but for society as a whole. I mean, if we want to create a system where genuine justice prevails,
Mm.
not just the illusion of it,
Mm.
right, then we need to, like, cultivate a deeper understanding of what actually constitutes a good life, both for ourselves and for others.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? It feels like we're bombarded with all these messages about what a good life should look like, but it's so often tied to, like, wealth, status,
Yeah.
achieving this picture-perfect image that's honestly often unattainable.
Right. You're absolutely right. And I think this is where Plato's emphasis on philosophy really comes into play.
Mhm.
Because remember, he wasn't just talking about, like, sitting around debating abstract ideas. He saw philosophy as a practice, a way of life,
Okay.
that involves constantly questioning, challenging our assumptions, examining our own biases. It's about developing that critical thinking muscle so we can, see through the noise and get to the heart of what really matters.
So instead of just accepting the easy answers or going along with the crowd, we need to be willing to, like, dig a little deeper, ask those tough questions, and be open to the possibility that our initial assumptions might be wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, this ties into another key point for Plato.
Mhm.
Education, but not just education in, like, the traditional sense of, memorizing facts and figures.
Yeah.
Plato believed that a truly just society requires informed and engaged citizens, people who can think critically, see through the BS, and stand up for what they believe in, even when it's unpopular.
So it's not just about what we know, it's about how we think.
Precisely. It's about developing the tools A&D, the courage to engage in meaningful dialogue debate,
Mm.
to, like, respectfully challenge each other's perspectives, and to work together to create a more just and equitable world. And that kind of education, that's something that benefits everyone, regardless of their background or their social standing.
Yeah, it sounds like Plato was way ahead of his time in a lot of ways.
He certainly was. And, while we might not be living in his ideal republic, I think his ideas offer some really valuable insights into how we can create a more just and fulfilling life for ourselves and for future generations.
Absolutely. So where do we go from here then? How do we take these, like, ancient ideas and apply them to the very modern challenges we face today?
That's the question, isn't it? And honestly, I think it starts with each of us looking inward, examining our own values, our own motivations, and asking ourselves some tough questions.
Like what?
What do we truly value? What kind of world do we actually want to live in? And what role do we want to play in creating that world?
It's a call to action, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole. It makes you realize that these conversations about justice and morality, they're not just like abstract philosophical debates. They're directly relevant to our lives and the choices we make every single day.
Exactly. Exactly. And perhaps that's the most important takeaway from our deep dive into Plato's Republic. It's a reminder that these ancient questions about justice, about virtue, about the good life, they're still just as relevant and urgent today as they were thousands of years ago. And, it's up to each of us to grapple with them, to keep those conversations going, and to strive to create a world where justice and truth prevail.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into Plato's Republic. We hope this episode has sparked some new ideas and encouraged you to think critically about the world around you. Until next time, remember to, Keep asking those tough questions, challenge your assumptions, and never stop seeking truth.
Because, as Plato reminds us, the unexamined life is not worth living.